All right, guys, so today we got to talk about Black Lives Matter as they are in the news once again for a very, very, very disturbing reason. Now, Black Lives Matter basically went away after Biden was elected because the Democrats didn't need him anymore, right? They tossed him aside. They were done playing with their toy that they used to try to get Trump out of office. However, they have come back in protest of vaccine mandates. Now, the BLM chapter that we're talking about here today is Black Lives Matter New York, which apparently is not really affiliated with the Black Lives Matter global network. So it's kind of like a rogue chapter, so to speak. However, I kind of lumped them all in the same because they are kind of the same to me, right? They're the same group. If you're stupid enough to call yourself Black Lives Matter, you should be lumped in with all of Black Lives Matter. And for what it is, you're probably Marxist, communist, whatever, right? But yes, the leader of Black Lives Matter New York, Hawk Newsome, has essentially come out and threatened the mayor-elect of New York City, Eric Adams, in regards to what they would do if Eric Adams is too tough on crime. And I want you guys to watch this news clip of BLM and their leader in New York City threatening the mayor with violence and protests and bloodshed, again, if the mayor is too tough on crime. Take a look.
Meanwhile, Mayor-elect Eric Adams has promised to be tough on crime when he takes office, in part by bringing back some controversial police tactics.
But after a recent meeting with Adams, Black Lives Matter activists threatened riots and bloodshed if he follows through. Fox 5's Kayla Malik is live in downtown Brooklyn with more details. It's pretty incredible to hear a group saying those two words to the incoming mayor.
Yeah, absolutely, Bianca. It's rattled a whole lot of people. Now, keep in mind, this meeting also marks the first time Black Lives Matter of Greater New York leaders has ever sat down with an incoming or sitting mayor. Eric Adams seemingly agreeing with the activists' ideas on how to combat poverty in the black community. But things got heated when the conversation turned to police reform.
If they think that they're going to go back to the old ways of policing, then we're going to take to the streets again. There will be riots, there will be fire, and there will be bloodshed.
Leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement threatening violence on New York City streets if Mayor-elect Eric Adams reinstates the NYPD's controversial anti-crime unit when he takes office next year.
So there's no way that we're going to let some Gestapo come in here and harm our people, right? We pray for peace, but black opportunities prepares for the worst.
Co-founder of BLM's Greater New York chapter, Hawk Newsome, saying this after a heated meeting with Adams at Brooklyn Borough Hall.
If you're telling me that I need to do this, if you're saying that I need to do this.
The sit-down taking place behind closed doors, but was live-streamed on Instagram by an attendee. While Adams and the activists did find common ground on issues surrounding policing in the black community, the former NYPD captain has vowed to bring back the anti-crime unit, a task force of mostly plainclothes officers, which was disbanded at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests last year. The conversation escalating when Newsome told Adams the organization would hold him accountable for any future police misconduct.
You hold me accountable?
Yeah.
I'm holding you accountable. You get on the ground, stop the violence in my community. I'm holding you accountable.
We have actively been trying to hold the NYPD accountable. What are you going to do to hold the NYPD accountable for their unlawful actions?
Brother, I mean, have you been living under a rock?
No.
Because I've been doing that I did it in the department.
In America?
Yeah. Brother,
maybe you should we're gonna look.
Walking in this room without his.
The mayor-elect also citing his 35 years in public service and promising to continue that work. But it wasn't enough for the activists who wanted Adams to commit to passing more than a dozen pieces of police reform legislation.
We have people in city council who can create problems for him. We have people in the streets who can create problems for this administration by shutting it down.
But worth noting, as he transitions to become the second black mayor in New York City history, Eric Adams seems far more focused on fixing New York City's surging crime problem. In an interview yesterday, Adams said that he wants to push Albany to fix bail reform legislation from last year once he takes office. He says the legislation takes it a step too far by allowing those charged with illegal possession of a gun to go free without bail. For now, we're live here in downtown Brooklyn. Bianca, send it back inside to you.
All right, Kayla, thank you so much for the update.
All right, guys, so you see that, you heard that, right? There was a testy exchange between BLM, New York, and Mayor Eric Adams, who, for whatever reason, decided to legitimize them and sit down with them and talk to them when, you know, you probably should be negotiating with domestic terrorists, right? Because when you are threatening people with violence and bloodshed, if you don't get what you want, that to me sounds like you're threatening people with domestic terrorism. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's what it sounds like. Okay, but I'm pretty sure the left-wing media will ignore that. But before I get too much into my commentary here, the main issue here is the plainclothes anti-crime unit, right? That was disbanded after the George Floyd protest when everybody got so woke. It was like, oh, we need to, you know, defund the police, right? So this is what they did in response to that. However, a year later from doing that, the residents of New York City, the people that actually have to live with the crime, right, and live in these communities that are being terrorized by criminals, they're like, we kind of like the plainclothes unit. We kind of want to bring them back. Take a look.
It's terrible. It's very, very terrible. And it needs to stop.
VILLITTHA Lewis has spent decades living here in Harlem and says she has not seen gun violence this bad since back in the 80s.
They need to stop selling these guns. They need to stop the killing.
The streets here in Harlem are so bad, community leaders want to take desperate measures to bring back the NYPD's plainclothes anti-crime officers. It's a team of officers some despise.
Plainclothes units should be brought back. I'm kind of short on the actual stop and frisk without effective policies.
So far this year, there have been 35 shootings compared to 26 last year in Harlem. That's a 34% increase. How would you like to see this plainclothes anti-crime unit come back? In what way?
Responsibly, one, and more aggressive. Anything short of the stop and frisk, because it violated a lot of Constitution, but they need to be more of a presence on the streets.
The NYPD dismantled anti-crime units last year after complaints about racial profiling, stop and frisk, and abusive behavior. The units were also involved in a disproportionate number of shootings, but now some are giving the unit a second look.
It seems to be a need for that, because it seems like since they've stopped, it have gotten worse.
Chaplain Robert Rice agrees, especially after praying with hundreds of families who lost their loved ones to gun violence, including the family of Shanice Young, a pregnant mother killed with her unborn baby.
We need the plainclothes back out there because we are losing these kids, and we're losing it at a record number. And families are crying out because they're crying out to say no more bloodshed.
Guys, isn't the irony crazy? Right? Isn't the irony crazy? You have BLM, right, New York, that claims to be a representative of the people, threatening more bloodshed if the mayor is too tough on crime, aka bringing back the plainclothes officers. But you have the actual people on the street, the people that are actually dealing with this crime, are saying, no, we want to bring back the anti-crime unit, the plainclothes officers, because we don't want any more bloodshed. Okay? If that doesn't tell you that BLM is not a movement that represents the people and what they actually want, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. They're literally saying the exact opposite, right? And obviously, I agree with the citizens and Mayor-elect Eric Adams on this issue. Eric Adams, I mean, he won because he ran on a tough on crime platform, right? He said, I'm going to be tough on crime, right? I was formerly a police officer. We experienced an uptick in crime, particularly felonious assault, gun violence in New York City, and we got to deal with it, right? We got to deal with it. And those plainclothes officers, the community, they liked them, right? Obviously, the whole stop and frisk stuff, that was controversial, right? And you can deal with the controversial things without having radical change, right? That's what reasonable people do. But see, these people, BLM, are not reasonable people. They're not represented by reasonable people. They're represented by radical communist Marxists that want to fundamentally change and demolish and destroy all of America's institutions, right? Including policing. That's why they're threatening violence if Eric Adams brings back this unit, even though they're trying to bring it back without stop and frisk. They're saying, look, we want to bring it back, but we don't want to do stop and frisk anymore. We just want to bring them back because they've been proven to be successful in terms of, you know, solving the crime problem in New York City. But again, BLM, they're not concerned about that. And when they can't get what they want, even when the people don't want what they want, they resort to violence, right? As a way to try to blackmail the mayor into capitulating to their crazy demands. And see, again, my question is, how will the media cover this? Because you saw the local media covering this, even they was just like, what the heck, man? Like, what? Like, that don't sound, this don't sound right. This don't sound like something we should be supporting. But is the national news going to pick this up? Right? Are they going to pick this up and say, hey, you know what? No, this is wrong. This is wrong. We should have no groups calling for violence against politicians, right? Or violence against police officers because they can't get a policy they want. This is not something that should be acceptable. Because again, if this was a group of Trump supporters saying, hey, we want bloodshed if such and such and such doesn't happen, it will be nonstop news. It will be nonstop news, right? Evidenced by what happened in January 6th, right? Nonstop news. But when it's BLM, it's crickets. It's silence. They have nothing to say. They're not really trying to cover it. And in my opinion, these mainstream news outlets that refuse to cover this stuff, that refuse to cover this type of hateful charged rhetoric, they are responsible for the deaths of these citizens that lack the proper protection in their neighborhoods because these politicians want to be soft on crime because they don't want to be called racist, right? Or they don't want to deal with BLM protests. The mainstream media is responsible because they're not actually covering this thing and actually revealing the truth about what some of these people are, which, it sounds to me like they're domestic terrorists, right? I wonder if the FBI is going to be showing up to this guy's door or investigating BLM New York for saying this, right? And potentially engaging in acts of domestic terrorism the same way they were considering doing that for parents, whom a vast majority of which simply just spoke out at school boards against woke indoctrination being pushed on their kids in school. I wonder if they're going to get the same treatment. I wonder if the FBI is going to potentially start to look into BLM and say, hey, you know what? These might be domestic terrorists. If I had to guess, probably not. So, you know, like I said, man, I hope Eric Adams does not fold. I hope that he stands up to this group and he listens to the actual people in regards to what to do here and get tough on crime and get these thugs and criminals off the streets. Right? That's what I hope he does. And look, I'm not even a fan of New York City's super tough gun laws. I'm not really a big fan of it because I think that it kind of goes against the Second Amendment. But if you're going to have these super tough gun laws on law-abiding, gun-owning citizens that make it hard for them to get a gun, then you best believe you better put the resources and the efforts into making sure that criminals and thugs don't get access to guns, right? If it's gonna be strict for regular law-abiding citizens, you better make sure that thugs and criminals don't have them illegally. But regardless, Eric Adams shouldn't fold to these people. You honestly shouldn't even be negotiating with them. Why are you legitimizing their platform? Because they're not legitimate. They're not a legitimate platform. And just so we don't get it twisted here, I don't mind any group peacefully protesting for a policy that they want, right? If you're against the vaccine mandates or whatever, or even if you're for vaccine mandates, I don't care what side of an issue you're on, I support your right to peaceful protest because that is your freedom of speech, right? However, that stops when you start making threats of violence and bloodshed just because you don't get a policy that you want. At that point, it's like, okay, no, your freedom of speech has run out. You don't have the freedom of speech to be out here threatening politicians with violence, like direct threats of violence, just because you don't get something that you want, right? That is ridiculous. So a word to the wise. A word to the wise of these politicians. Do not legitimize these people because this is what you have to deal with. They're not reasonable people to negotiate with. Therefore, you shouldn't even be negotiating with them. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.